Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons because I usually do talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And hey, today it's not about Marvel, it's about power gamers. I'm going to talk about the power gamer and their play style in Dungeons and Dragons. And frankly, it does permeate into other types of games as well. So it's not like it's set in one type of game system, although I do think it probably exists more in Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and any kind of clone of Dungeons and Dragons. I think that sort of tends to wind up being something you see more there than anywhere else. That's been my experience, but that's beside the point. So today's presentation, none of this advice is exclusively for the Dungeon Master and every adult in a gaming group. And I specify adult. Every adult in a gaming group is responsible for managing themselves and managing the relationship of the people in that party or group, not just the Dungeon Master. I know a lot of people voice this differently, but I will make it clear. If you are adults in a group, you are all responsible, not just the Dungeon Master. Now, if you're dealing with kids or teenagers, that's a different kettle of fish. They're still developing and maturing. Everyone usually has a combination. Like every single person who ever plays Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, everyone usually has a combination of different play styles. They're not usually playing a role-play game with just one play style involved. There's usually multiple play styles involved, not just one. And also the following suggestions and recommendations regarding power gamers, they're all general aspects of a power gamer. They're not absolute. This is not to be taken as gospel. Okay, these are trends and they are in many ways stereotypes, but they tend to be the kinds of behaviors you see and the kinds of reactions you get. And so it's good to understand that we're not talking about an absolute here. Now, the power gamer playstyle. What is the power gamer playstyle? Well, essentially the power gamer playstyle exists in many video games. Like many people playing video games will have a tendency to have that power gamer playstyle, but also, since we are playing tabletop role-play games, the tabletop role-playing game community tends to have a lot of this. And as I've said, Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder tabletop role-playing games, because they are, and any kind of clone of D&D, they tend to attract power gamers more to that rule system. Why is that? Because they have a lot of rules. Okay, power gamers are drawn to a lot of rules. That's what they focus on. A power gamer thrives on gaining levels and loves cool abilities that come with those new levels. So that's really where their heart is at. Power gamers defeat monsters primarily to take their treasure and use their stuff against future enemies. That's what they're trying to do. The story and role-play aspect are usually secondary, okay, compared to something like actions and awesome abilities and magic items for a power gamer. Now, when I say this, you've got to remember, as I said, power gamers and any person is going to be a combination of different styles, but this tends to be sort of where their head's at. Most players have a little power gamer in them, okay? Most people who are playing the game have a little bit of power gamer in them. It may not be a lot, but there's a little bit there. I will also say not everybody is like this. Some people have no desire for any kind of power in the game. A couple of elements that are part of the fun of playing Dungeons and Dragons as a game is accumulating power, but also using that power to accomplish astonishing deeds and performing great feats. So there is an aspect to the game where we are kind of looking for more power out of it. We are looking to change the environment we're playing in. There's actually nothing wrong with enjoying power, magic items, and special abilities in a game. It's actually fine. So what do power gamers like? What do they actually like out of the game? Well, they like to optimize a character. They'll be going to optimize not just the character's attributes, but mostly it's going to be about combat performance. This is the fun for a power gamer, but it's not necessarily the only focus. You can change that focus. Initially, power gamers tend to focus on the one aspect that has the most amount of rules, and the most amount of rules, Dungeons and Dragons, revolves around combat. So therefore, combat performance is a big aspect, but it won't necessarily be the only focus. You can train them out of that sort of thing. It's common for power gamers to pore over supplements from different books for better character options. Okay, so they're the ones who'll probably be going out and buying all the splat books in your group. Or if they're not buying the splat books, they're online searching for all that information for free. Generally, power gamers spend less time on story and roleplay elements, generally. A power gamer prefers combat to other kinds of encounters, because that's where, as I said, the bulk of the Dungeons and Dragons rules exist. Also, I would say that power gamers often prefer to be referred to as an optimizer. This is to avoid the negative stereotypes that power gaming has attached to it. And there are quite a few negative stereotypes and aspects attached to it. Some for good reason and some for bad aren't legitimate. So, and of course, you've got to understand not every power gamer operates exactly the same way, and you can have power gamers that have healthy communication styles and really unhealthy communication styles. A major driving force for a power gamer is survival, succeeding and winning combat, but also winning the game. Which is sort of part of the reason why they build a powerful character in the first place. Now, this might be a result of being trained by the dungeon master or the games that they're playing, because they are very deadly games. They need to make sure that they can have a character capable of surviving that game. The version of the game will affect that as well. There's lots of different aspects to why they will build to survive, succeed, and win. Now, how do we go about engaging your power gamer in the game that you're running, whether you are a player or a dungeon master? Now, a lot of this is going to be focusing more on the dungeon master rather than the players, but not exclusively. If you stress story rewards, such as quest experience points, this is a very constructive way to impact the power gamer's motivations. This is a huge motivation for them. Acquiring experience points is a very easy way for them to figure out if they are getting closer to the next level, because the next level means more stuff. Using a desired magic items such as the adventure hook, tying it in, will ensure the power gamer is actually interested. What you don't want to do is make the magic item a single item that everybody will want, and the power gamer has now got to compete with the other player characters for that magic item they really want. That will cause problems. Power gamers respond positively to most rewards. So most of the rewards that you can give out in your game, they will respond very well to. Experience points, even milestones, if you explain how the milestones are going to be working, they like that sort of thing. Character levels, so leveling up. Treasure, magic items, equipment, story benefits. It kind of sounds like any person playing the game, does it not? Facilitating access to new options. If you can give them access to new options, abilities and powers, this is something that a power gamer craves. They're always looking for the next thing. Power gamers also love to playtest new material such as the Unearthed Arcana, homebrew content that you might have made yourself as a dungeon master or a player in a group, and third-party options. Any kind of third-party player character options. They're really going to be interested if they're well designed and they're strong. Okay, if they're not well designed and they're confusing and they're not very strong, they're probably not going to be that interested. Include encounters that emphasize the player character's attributes, because power gamers are trying to be useful. It's not like they're trying to be the best at the table, although sometimes that is the case. In fact, quite often it can be the case, but they are trying to be useful. They consider that their impact as part of the group is important, and they take that quite seriously. Allow a power gamer to rebuild their character. Like, one of the simplest ways to solve a lot of your problems is if Dungeon Masters allow them to rebuild their character outside of game time, so that they can try new features and combinations because they will have already thought out a lot of the stuff in advance, but they can only theorize so much. In practice, it's going to be different. So if you allow them to test and trial things, eventually you will see a lot of change in your character and their character building, and eventually it will stabilize once they figure out exactly what they're after. That's what my experience has been so far. Okay. Ensure power gamers don't do the following things. It's really important that there are certain things you do not want power gamers to start engaging in or doing at your table, because it will wreck the experience for the other players. It will wreck the experience for the Dungeon Master. It will wreck the experience for you. And frankly, it will wreck the experience for them, because the backlash against somebody who is power gaming will be quite extensive if they start doing these sorts of things. So here are the things I'm going to say you don't want them doing at the table. Avoid a power gamer becoming a lot more powerful than the other player characters. They're always going to be more powerful than everybody else. But if they're a lot more powerful than every other player character at the table, that's a problem. Ask them to make a less powerful character, because a Dungeon Master can't create combat encounters that will match a wide breadth of difficulty without causing problems. You just can't do it. It's impossible. Stop power gamers dominating all combat encounters is a difficult thing to do, if not impossible for a Dungeon Master to achieve. So first off, just ignore that. That is not going to work. What you can do that will help is you can require multiple objectives so that one player cannot achieve everything. That means that instead of we're just going to fight the monsters and kill them and whoever and survive, you put in some other things that have to take place during that combat, things they have to achieve outside of just reducing the monster's hit points. If you do that, then the power gamer will have to rely on other people to achieve things, and you'll spread out the focus of that combat. A power gamer will try to actually try to take more than their fair share of treasure. So because a power gamer is probably going to try to take more than they should compared to everybody else, whatever their reason, it doesn't matter. Okay? Their reason is beside the point. Fair share is a fair share. So ask the group to determine a reasonable allocation of the resources. As a Dungeon Master, do not do this yourself, because you wind up setting yourself up as being the bad person. Okay? Instead, you put this on peer pressure is far more efficient and effective than one person saying it has to be done this way. You put that on the group. The group determines that. That way they are going to be able to affect and control the behavior of the power gamer. The group needs to ensure that the power gamer doesn't take or acquire all the best magic items, because it's quite possible they might do that. So you need to let the group make that decision, and how they allocate it and do it in a fair and equitable way is up to them. You will maybe suggest that, you can suggest some solutions for doing that, some strategies, but you let the group do that. A power gamer has a tendency to treat other player characters as their lackeys, like they are just their little sidekicks that follow them around, and they are the super being, the superhero. So remind the power gamer that this is a team game, okay? And it's important that they understand that everybody's important on the team, not just them, and that the other players' characters are not their lackeys, okay? They're not going to be carrying their stuff. They're not going to perform actions in any part of the game that allows them to use all of their features to their maximum efficiency. It's not about them. It has to be about everybody. Okay. Arguing with the other players and the Dungeon Master over how rules are going to work is something that power gamers are prone to doing. It's just one of those things. Now you could say this is a rules lawyer, but power gamers will do this, okay? Because they're so tied to everything needs to work to the rules, because that was what their character was based on in the first place. When you change the rules, it upsets their calculations. So they are going to be wanting the rules to be run the way they have interpreted them and the way that they are written in the book. And if you're not doing it that way, they will argue with you. Don't let this happen, because it will go on for a very long time and you'll wind up playing no Dungeons and Dragons. Instead, you'll be arguing about rules with them. Now, bossy power gamers will try to override the Dungeon Master. And look, I would say amongst the nerdy community, there are probably a lot of very arrogant and bossy and self-important individuals. And amongst them is not just a power gamer, okay? There are other styles of play that do exactly the same thing. But when you get a bossy power gamer, they will try to override the Dungeon Master. And the Dungeon Master needs to have the ability to make rulings. They need to have the ability to have house rules. And they need to be able to be given the ability to interpret the rules differently to how the power gamer interpreted them, okay? Because that's the Dungeon Master's running it. So what you need to do when a power gamer tries to override the Dungeon Master is you need to set some expectations about their behavior. That this is not acceptable in the group. That they are not to go and argue and try to override the Dungeon Master's rulings and the way that they've interpreted the rules. The only time that they can do this is when they are acting as the Dungeon Master. That's the only time they get to do that. Because they're not going to be arguing with themselves, are they? Okay? So there is no argument. So that's the expectation. The only time you get to override anything is when you are the Dungeon Master. That's it. A power gamer can overwhelm a Dungeon Master fairly efficiently and effectively with different player options. Like they're going to want to access as many different player options as possible. So a Dungeon Master, you have to set some limits within your group. If you don't, you will become overwhelmed. You will not be able to keep up with everything, and you won't be able to manage the whole situation. So please set some limits, okay? The group shouldn't allow a power gamer to criticize another player's character build. This is really bad, okay? Anytime anybody does this, if you are criticizing another person's character build, that's a bad thing. And unfortunately, there's a tendency for power gamers to do this. Okay? If they have not optimized their character, if it's suboptimal in some way, if you feel like they've made a mistake in terms of their character build, do not criticize them. And don't let power gamers do it. And it's not up to the Dungeon Master to do that. Everybody who's playing the game should be doing this, not just the Dungeon Master. Okay, now that we've done let's just rein in the power gamer. Let's talk about the positive power gamer traits, because they do have some. Like all player styles, there are positive elements to them. Your group can overcome challenges more efficiently and effectively and have fun in the process if the group has a power gamer in it. So in many respects, it's good to at least have at least one power gamer in your group, because they will ensure that the group doesn't do anything hugely silly. They will have calculated the probability. They will have figured out what sort of things people need to be able to do efficiently. They may be trying to give you instructions on how to do things, but they're good at setting up plans. Okay, if they have given enough time, they can work out a pretty good plan for a group. Power gamers have extensive rules knowledge, since they must know the rules to take advantage of them. So you don't have to worry about them not knowing how the rules work as a Dungeon Master or as another player. They will know how they work, or at least to their interpretation. The power gamer can serve as a valuable resource as a result, saving you from having to look up the rules that you don't remember. Because you can ask them, they'll probably be able to quote what page it's on as well in some cases. Not always, but at least the chapter. A power gamer can tell you if a character option is more powerful than another feature and why. And in some cases, as a Dungeon Master or a player, they can tell you which character options are overpowered and probably should not be in the game. Now, power gamers always like to have more power, but they also acknowledge that there are certain things that you put into a game that actually make it unplayable. Not all power gamers will see this. You'll probably find that this is a product of a power gamer who's been doing it for a while, so they have some experience. So there are some positives. Now, how do you seat a power gamer at your table? There's a couple of different ways you can go about doing this, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So seating for a power gamer at a table, now that is provided they will allow you to do that. They might not allow you to seat them at the table, okay? And if they won't, then just leave it alone. Seating the gamer near to you if you plan to use them as a ready rules reference. If you're going to do that, let them know that, look, I don't know all the rules. I want you to sit close to me so that I can ask you questions about the rules. Now, they may say, no, I don't want to do that, but I'm happy to look up rules when you need them or let you know what those rules are. And you know, if you can get them sitting next to you, great. If you can't, you can't. But if you tell them that's what you're wanting to do, then they usually aren't going to have too much of a problem with that. Similarly, a power gamer can bring a new player up to speed if they sit together. Now, you need to ask, because sometimes power gamers don't like doing this. You have to ask the power gamer, are they willing to help a new player? And if they say yes, great. And if they say no, they're not really that interested, they want to just play their own character and do their own thing, then just leave them be. Be sure the power gamer doesn't dictate the new player character's actions. Okay, that's a tendency. They might decide, no, you should do this because this is the most optimal, most powerful thing to do in the situation. This makes far more sense. Why would you do anything else? And there are no choices. And then suddenly your new player is not making any choices whatsoever. Instead, it is better to make it clear to them that you're just to explain to them what's going on, not to tell them what they have to do, and to allow them to make mistakes. As soon as you start saying stuff like that, power gamers sort of like, okay, let them make mistakes. I can kind of understand that. It might be a bit hard sometimes for them to manage because they don't like to make mistakes, but you have to say something like this. The power gamer should only help the new player understand what's going on. That's it. Power gamers sometimes downplay the importance of story and role playing. Not always, but it can be a tendency. So you might like to place them near people who are an actor or a storyteller in play style. There is another play style, the actor, which I'll explain in future videos, and then there's the storyteller play style. And again, they're actually a good compromise in many respects. So the proximity of these different play styles can often yield or produce a nice synergy, quite a productive synergy, in fact. But sometimes it also leads to conflict depending on the personality of the players. So if it doesn't work, break it up, okay? But it can work sometimes. So I'm going to put it out there as a suggestion. Designing a power gamer encounter type. Like when you're designing your encounters and you're designing around a power gamer, how do you do this so that you don't cause yourself a whole lot of headache? Well, power gamers optimize their characters for combat as a default. As I said, because the rules tend to be revolving around combat. Not because the game of Dungeons & Dragons is in fact a tactical combat simulator. That's not true. The only reason there's lots and lots of rules for Dungeons & Dragons is because that's what you need rules for. Everything else that's part of the game, you really don't need rules for. So as a default, they tend to gravitate towards that. If you establish in your campaign as a dungeon master that you will be featuring things such as exploration, traps, puzzles, social interactions, skill challenges, if you know what that means, and other types of encounters, a die-hard power gamer will optimize their character for all of those challenges. Not just combat. If you make it clear that your game is going to incorporate a lot of stuff and not just combat, and they know what's coming, they will optimize for everything that you're going to throw at them. Okay? Because that's how they work. Power gamers don't generally find easy combats satisfying, so throwing an easy combat at them isn't going to be satisfying at all. If their character is so powerful that everything you put forward to them is getting crushed, they won't like that either. They actually prefer to have a powerful character and still have the encounter be hard or deadly. Okay? They like to be challenged. So when you're giving them combat, challenge them. Any kind of thing, even outside of combat, okay, whatever it is, be traps, puzzles, so forth, many times they like to be challenged. They don't like it easy. Do not just increase the combat encounter difficulty to accommodate a power gamer. Now, the problem with increasing the combat encounter difficulty, because the power gamer is got a very powerful character and finding the encounters easier, is the rest of the player characters will struggle to survive. They won't be able to keep up. Instead, include, as I said, secondary objectives outside of we just kill the monsters. You've got to do that. You can increase the threat directed at the power gamer's character. Okay, as a general rule, they don't mind you directing more firepower on their character compared to everybody else. And in fact, in many cases, they will welcome it. I wouldn't say that every single power gamer is exactly the same, but you will generally find they prefer that over you making the encounter so difficult that they're the only one who survives every single battle. I recommend not creating consistently deadly combat encounters. You don't want to do that. You don't want to consistently create deadly combat encounters or traps or challenges that result in character death. Now, if you are getting a lot of character death because you've cranked everything up, all it will do is exaggerate the problem that the power gamer has, and they will double down on their key behavior, which is to create a more powerful character. So if you consistently throw deadly combat encounters or traps or challenges at them and characters die, then they will see that as I have to change what I'm doing. I must make something more powerful. They may in fact go to all the other players and say, you have to make something more powerful because we're not getting where we need to be. And that will create a new set of problems for you. So just something to bear in mind. Okay. Playing to a power gamer's strengths. It's actually really helpful to do this. Let the power gamer from time to time shine by showing how their character can excel. They like to have the spotlight sometimes. They like people to know that what they've done is they've achieved something quite significant with their character. So let that happen. Most people playing a character kind of like this sort of thing anyway. Power gamers are no different. The power gamer can plan out the best way to overcome a monster or a challenge of any kind if the dungeon master warns them about what's coming. This is actually a good strategy. If you're worried the group cannot deal with a situation, if you warn the power gamer about what's coming, however you want to do that, whether it's metagamed or not metagamed, or you drop foreshadowing or you drop hints, the power gamer will plan. And if you give them time to do so, they will do it. Okay, outside of game time, an entire week from one session to the next is a good amount of time. That's more than sufficient time for them to figure it out. Now let's talk about exploiting the power gamer's weaknesses. Identifying the weaknesses of a power gamer's character and designing encounters and monsters to target those vulnerable spots from time to time, not all the time, from time to time, but not consistently, is actually a good idea. Create situations that require checks that the power gamer has the poorest character skills or abilities. Now you can do that occasionally, like actually have things there that they won't do well, and they will rebuild their character and design it so that it can manage those sorts of things. Now whether they supplement it with something else other than just character build, they may find another way of doing that. You don't want to punish a power gamer or try to defeat their character. Rather, what you're trying to do is offer a broad range of challenges, significant challenges that they find rewarding. Testing a character's weaknesses encourages a power gamer to improve their play style. They will make adjustments. Now, this technique motivates a power gamer to acquire items and find other ways of shoring up their weaknesses, because if you can't build your character necessarily to cover everything. It's actually impossible. Power gamers know this, so they will look for other ways of filling in the gaps and shoring up any kind of weakness that they have. They will also try to do that with the rest of the party sometimes as well. Learning to rely on another player character in the group is really healthy for a power gamer. It's not something they gravitate towards straight away. It's not something they necessarily like, but it's really healthy for them even if they don't like it. Okay? So you should definitely have that occur. If you can build it in such a way that that happens, great. Okay? Because it will change the way they operate, and in a really good way. Make villains learn the poor, the power gamer's tactics. So you really want to look at any kind of villain that you have. If you can have that villain learn the power gamer's tactics, that's great. But this requires you to manage to be able to keep a recurring villain alive long enough over the course of your long adventure, hopefully, or campaign, so that you can have the villain, after each encounter, understand how the party works, but in particular, how the strongest individual in the party, the power gamer's character, and so they will adopt different tactics, okay? This shows that the monsters are dynamic, and when you start showing that to a power gamer, they understand that they will get bored. If they have the same strategy and tactic over and over again, they get bored. So changing things up is a good thing. So it's always good over time, if they keep interacting with the same villain, to change your tactics. The power gamer will be challenged to explore new tactics, but also one of the things that often can occur is if a power gamer has found a specific strategy and tactic that seems to be a trump card, they'll use the same strategy over and over again. Now, as I said, that they will generally eventually get bored, but initially they will be quite pleased with themselves. But it won't be rewarding for you as a dungeon master or for the rest of the group, because the outcome will always be the same. Power gamers don't like being called munchkins. Sometimes they don't like being called min-maxers. Quite often, they don't like being called power gamers, because the term has a really strong negative connotation within the gaming community. Now, some power gamers don't care. I've got power gamers in my group, and they accept it, they understand it. They don't care about the semantics. You could call them a power gamer, you could call them a munchkin, you could call them a min-maxer, you could call them an optimizer. They accept that as a general rule, most people lump all of that together, and that's their definition. It's the same person as far as they're concerned, the same type of person's play. They don't differentiate it. I know some people who want to always be referred to as an optimizer and never be considered a power gamer, a munchkin, or a min-maxer. And look, the terminology keeps changing over time, and the words are not important. It's how people respond to the stereotype and the category. That's important. The name itself is absolutely unimportant. The only word that's probably really heavily connotated and quite hurtful is probably munchkin. Munchkin is a pretty low word to be using. Okay, power gamer, min-maxer, not so bad. Now, if you want to get on their good side, use the name that they like. Okay, right. The older and more mature your power gamer gets, so the older they are, the more they have been playing, the more mature they become over time, the more versatile their playstyle becomes. Their playstyle will develop to a point that it appears they have multiple playstyles. In fact, you may not even notice that they are a power gamer. Okay? And as I said, everybody has multiple playstyles, but sometimes people have a playstyle that's very strongly weighted towards one thing. This has been my experience at my table. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 people in my group who are all power gamers. All of them, almost all of them, about 3 out of the 4, are dungeon masters as well. And what that means is, because we've been playing for such a long time, some of them have changed the way they do things. They understand that their play approach doesn't work for everybody at the table. and so they have adjusted. Some of them are more focused on role play now. Some people prefer more the style of play. Some people in my group are now looking at the game in terms of, well, I've built all the powerful characters. Can I make a unoptimized, suboptimal character and make it work? That's their new challenge. So yeah, don't get caught up with the fact that you think that they are always going to stay and play the same way, because that's actually not true. I can assure you, I'm 51 and I have a number of people in my group who are in their late 20s right through to their mid 50s, and those power gamers, they have changed the way they play. I'm hoping that this video was useful to you, and this either helps you as a player or as a dungeon master navigate the play style, the power gamer. And if it has, great. So if you have any questions and feedback, please use the comments section. Thank you for watching my video, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.